Hi, I'm John Best. I live in Indianapolis, Indiana. Currently, I'm a professional software developer, professional musician, and spent 10 years in music education and about another 10 years in professional software development. And I'm combining that into a PhD in music technology at IUPUI in Indianapolis. I was an educator, music educator for about 10 years, band director, adjunct professor, percussion type thing. Through my teaching process, I got an iPhone, and there were certain apps that I wanted to have, and they didn't exist. And I had enough of a computer background in my past that I coded a metronome for marching bands called Click Designer that had a few year lifespan and kind of died away, and made another app called Song Marker that was used. It was designed primarily for color guards to rehearse with, and both those apps got featured in like a WGI article at one point called "Absolutely Necessary." Like there's the pun. And but that was a while back. But then, as soon as people figured out I knew how to do those kinds of things, I started getting a lot of offers to do all sorts of crazy tech work, and it led me down about a 10-year path of like being in the technology startup world, things I never thought I'd be doing, like writing elections software. And, right now I'm working for a fintech company, transferring currencies, and things like that, or like video streaming, and things I never thought I would get myself involved in. But I've had all that experience. And so now I've just started a PhD in music technology, where I'm trying to bring both of these worlds back on top of each other. And my dissertation focus, I've just started it. I'm like 3 weeks in right now, right? And but my dissertation focus that I think I want to have is, what is that, like, it's music education in the metaverse. So like, what's that digital layer going to evolve into in a classroom in a musical setting? And so there's some different ways to explore that, what that's going to mean. But yeah, that's what I'm doing. That's the quick story.
So you're doing this work with your PhD, you're working on this technology, you're bringing those things together, as you said.
Yes.
What might that look like for the future? Do you have any ideas? I know you're just starting to explore this process.
Yes, it's early on. I guess the initial vision, about 4 years ago, I got really interested in virtual reality because I just thought it was the coolest thing ever, right? And went and made the investment, like, yes, I want to start developing for this. So I bought the necessary hardware, computers, and the goggles and everything, to explore that. Back then it was an Oculus Rift headset was the ones that were out there. And then through the process of exploring what's capable in that technology, my brain was always going back to, how could this help, like, teach a student how to, like, see a major scale. Like, one of the ways that I would teach on a keyboard instrument to see a major scale is, I used the reference of, like, the old Michael Jackson video, Billie Jean King, like, think of the notes of the scale lighting up on the keyboard and then just play the shape of the scale. And that worked great until the kids were like, we've never seen that video. And then I had to come up with a different analogy. But so I was like, just pick your favorite color and imagine the notes in that favorite color. But the beauty is, in VR, you can actually show that to them. So it's air playing, but you can light the scale up in whatever color they want, and they can learn what those shapes look like and have that visual reference. And is that better or is that worse? I don't know. Does that make them learn it faster? I don't know. Does the fact that not having the tactile response in the stroke, and just sort of like having the arm movements and the spatial awareness of how to move around the scale, is that going to help them play it better or be a quicker assimilation for them? I don't know yet, but these are the things that I want to explore, right? And determine, like, the things that the technology can do, which ones enhance the learning and which ones are just a cool way to do it that may or may not have any benefit.
I have a lot of conversations with different people about all the different ways that students learn, and
Yeah,
young teachers learn. You have to say it a lot of different ways. You have to do a lot of
yeah.
different things because students learn so differently. So there are a lot of students that I think are very visual learner, or that idea of seeing it and being in that environment, and like I can imagine how that could definitely be helpful to many students.
Right. And then also like typical things that I know that are challenges for percussionists are, for instance, I don't know any middle schooler that has a set of timpani at home, right? And I don't, most of them, well, actually nowadays, sometimes they have larger keyboard instruments at home and not the little bell sets. Sometimes they do that in some schools, you know. Um, but with the VR headset, if they already have it, which they're becoming more popular, they could at least practice the motions of their timpani piece and hear what it sounds like at home, even though they're not actually hitting timpani. And they could at least, you know, learn their major scales or, you know, work on stroke and kind of get feedback about whether they're moving correctly, even though they're not hitting anything. Or you could have a practice pad that they're hitting and it makes the sound of a drum. You know, like there's things you could do. Or the other thing I've seen is in classrooms, um, when you have 20 percussion students and 5 instruments, and so you're having to rotate and get around. And like another marimba is 8-10 grand for a music program, but a few VR headsets might be 1 grand. And then is it as good as playing the real thing? Of course not, but like it's something, and at least they're staying involved and doing something. So like these are the ways that I'm thinking, the things I want to explore. Like what are the types of things that could benefit a classroom, you know? Or what if a teacher was at the front of the room and they could, you know, say like F major on a tablet or a mobile phone, and then all the kids' headsets change into the right scale, and then that they're able to like do some classroom management and teaching from here, or put instructions up, you know, or whatever. So that's kind of the way my head's going right now.
Yeah, and especially I would think going through this whole online learning thing that we've done so much, and now so many people are adapting this and saying, hey, you know, there are drum corps
Right,
that are doing virtual camps instead of making people have to make the travel and do those expenses. I
right,
imagine there'll
for
be
tryouts.
applications that way, of course, too.
Yeah, there are. In fact, my the professor at the school here is my academic advisor, Scott Deal. He is kind of pioneering a lot of that work as well. Like from he's been doing it for about 20 years now. Like they call it telematic performances and things like that, which would be the same thing as auditions and things like that. And so a lot of that streaming technology and how do you get that to be as clean as or you know as close to the real thing as possible. And you know I've done some of those types of uh, experiences before. For instance, I taught at Stephen F. Austin for a little while in Nacogdoches, but I lived in Austin, and it was a 4-hour drive to get there. And I taught about 6-hour lessons, and I would drive for 4 hours, teach 6 students, drive all the way back, and that was cumbersome. And the professor and I said, like the head professor and I decided, hey, let's try something, and we did like one lesson a month virtual. And what I found was that I could do like if it was like a makeup lesson or something and I couldn't make it out there, we could do it sometime in another way. But what I found is you could get 90 to 95% of the same feedback if you had, you know, it set up well in the room. It wasn't the same thing as being there in person, but I could give a lot of the same feedback. So it was pretty interesting to see how far technology had come, and that's 10 years ago already, you know. So yeah.
Yeah, it's very exciting what that means, and I love that there's a person like you who's super smart that's out there working on his doctorate, like working on these kind of things. I love the idea that you're doing that because we deserve to have this access to technology, and I think sometimes, you know, we in the music, we think of ourselves as sort of like, you know, analog, sit in the room together, which I think is what we do. But I love the idea that we can benefit from all of this technology and all the smart things that people like yourself are working on.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and I guess you know that's part of the process is trying to figure out where you know where you fit in into the whole grand scheme of things. Because you know I've been a band director. I have the utmost respect for band directors, and also realized that wasn't me. Right? You know, I've been the percussion teacher. I've been the adjunct professor. You know, I've also been like the technology guy working on something that has nothing to do with music, and none of those really feel like that's where I'm going to have the most impact. And like you know, the university I'm at, IUPUI, is one of the few places you can get a doctorate in this in the world. You know, in the states, I think there might be 3 places, and so um, coming into this building and seeing music practice rooms and like a low C vibraphone go by and see a classroom where people are learning how to code and see mathematical equations on the other classroom board, like that finally feels like, yes, this is me, like this is my place. This is the things I'm interested in and the things that I can help move forward. So that's my goal.
That's cool. You're talking to us from one of the practice rooms there at school, and I appreciate you
Yeah.
doing that. You said
Yeah.
IUPUI. Can you tell us what that is in case we don't know?
Yes, it's Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. Um, the longer story there is I hear that it's about to split and just be called IU Indianapolis as of next year or something like that. But that's in the works. But it's a program they have a music technology degree path, undergrad all the way through PhD. So I'd looked into the master's program here for several years, but I'd already had a master's degree, so I was not really sure if I wanted to do that or not. And then when they offered PhD, it's something I've had my sights on for a while, and it finally became the right time to do it. So yeah.
That's fantastic. So since we're talking about technology and you are in that wired that way and in that world and so good at that,
Yes, sir.
I think band directors have to deal with technology in the world of marching band a lot these days, and that can be
Yes.
very intimidating because it's not something that a lot of us sort of grew up doing, and we're trying to figure it out. And sometimes you're putting a lot of faith in, someone on your staff, which is works fine, but I still think can be very intimidating. So can we talk about that relationship that band directors and marching bands have with technology,
Yes.
and what advice would you want to give some band director or staff member at a school to help them sort of either be less intimidated by it or have a better relationship, or just general advice on how to do it better?
Um, well, there's the humorous responses, and then there's like the actual, you know, but yeah, one of the things I notice, is like the first reaction is get a kid to help you because the kid's going to be better at it than you, and he's going to show you stuff and have more time to tinker with it, right? So that's like kind of the humorous response. But I think the biggest thing that I think that I've never had with technology, that's not true. I have had it, but I've overcome it. Is that fear factor that I'm going to mess something up, you know? And that's kind of the first thing that you've got to get over. I remember the first time that I wanted to push code that I wrote onto an iPhone. That was scary. I thought I was about to brick my iPhone and I didn't know if I should do it or not. And I had to like get over that fear in order to actually make progress. And I think there's like a fear factor that keeps people from learning how to use this stuff. And so, but that fear factor quickly goes away with familiarity. So you just have to push over the hump with that. If it's a digital mixer, like learn, maybe you want to learn the things that could be the maximum things that could go wrong. Like, make sure that you mute before you unplug the cable, or, here's the kill switch. Like if something goes majorly wrong, you can stop it all if you do this right here. And like, hit the mute on the master channel and show them the basics to where they start to feel comfortable doing the things that they're doing. And I've been a part of some really good workshops. Like that was one of the things most high school band programs that I worked in. I've been the guy that's been helping run the marching band sound, or educating one of the students how to run it, or setting up the equipment, or later on a consultant. Hey, what should we purchase and how do we set it up? And to do some, and maybe I'd come in and do some training or things like that on it. And so there's a process involved to get there, and a lot of it is um, knowing the procedures to take. It's not really, if you can plug in a VCR to your people don't plug in VCRs anymore. But back in the day when we had to if you plug in a streaming device into a TV, right? That's about as much as you need to know in order to like start setting up audio equipment, but you just do it over and over again. And then you learn how all these things are just compartmentalized and then how they work together. And but yeah, some of the camps, like they're becoming more frequent. At Morehead State University, I was a part of a camp for a few years. I don't know if he's still doing it. A guy named Brian Mason, who's I think he's an administrator at Morehead State University now, and actually one of the guys that got me into drum corps way back when I was in high school. Like he came to my high school and taught us, wrote some of our music, and then convinced me not only to check out drum corps but also go to University of Kentucky. But anyway, he had me in, and I was one of the teachers of the camp where we're teaching band directors how to use audio equipment, you know? And so we would go through just the real basics of here's how you set up the mixer, and then hands on, let's get in there and actually do it. And because then that all helped get over that fear factor. I think that's the most important thing, because it's not really crazy difficult, but it's very logical, you know, if you just understand that like you're just moving something around and you just have to know how things flow. If that it's hard to like summarize in a podcast, but I would say like those are the types of things, if you just start learning a little bit, it'll all start putting itself together, you know, and it'll build upon itself.
There are resources out there to help you learn the basics and get
Right.
familiar and have that experience. You
Yeah.
just to start by seeking
Yeah.
those out.
Right. And it's becoming a lot more prevalent. Honestly, one of the reasons I'm doing this degree is because I felt like I got so far pulled away from music, you know, and I'm coming back in. But I am noticing that um, there's a lot more resource now than there was 5 years ago about how to do these things, and more camps available, more clinics um, at conventions like your music educators state convention. There's a lot more clinics about how to handle audio in your program, and that's just like one aspect of technology in the, you know, like for a band program. But that's a big one that a lot of people, they spend a lot of money on that stuff and have to figure it out and set it up in 4 minutes, right? So
Well, of course, that's the thing. Yeah, the indoor drumline guys are masters at that part of figuring out how to get it set up correctly and have it taught how to do it and then make it happen fast. What's interesting about this too, John, is I find myself saying to band directors a lot like, hey, whatever your instrument is or your area of expertise, you need to know how to spin a flag, at least a little bit. You need to know what that's all about. You need to know how to, play those some things on a marimba or whatever. So whatever your experiences are, but I hadn't really thought of it until right now we're having this conversation. They need
you're
to
right.
have
Yeah.
this little, at least some bit of information here too, some experience around the electronics. So your sort of point of get in there, learn the basics, and learn to get over the initial intimidation factor. I think that
Right.
would be true for spinning a flag or throwing a rifle or plugging in your electronics.
That's an absolutely brilliant point. You know, it's basically an instrumental methods class. It's just your instrument's a mixer. And that's great. That's a great point. And something to think about for curriculum, right? That's probably going to find its way in eventually. But that would be a good way of conceptualizing it and presenting it to the powers that be, why the necessity for it. Like this is part of instrumental, you know, methods. So
It's part of what you're
yeah.
doing. It's part of what you're presenting out there in the world. If you're in a marching band these days, you're probably going to have some of these pieces in the mix.
Right.
No pun intended. And the other thing that's interesting, John, too, is that I always lamented. It seems to me like we keep adding new layers to our shows that are very exciting, that make the shows more interesting and fun and surprising. But it also adds layers of things that can continuously go wrong. It used to
Right.
be, man, well, my trumpet solo is to make it through and hit that note or whatever. But now you have to also make, is he mic'd correctly, and is all this prop moving around him going to move? So the intimidating thing
Yeah.
to me is all the layers. As a
Yeah.
technology guy, how do I get past the idea that I'm adding all these things that can extra layers of things that can go wrong?
Um, I would say the way I've done, so the majority of when I've done this work was with the Woodlands High School, and I was a pit tech for them for several years as one of, you know, many different, like taught private lessons and pit tech and that kind of thing. And the way that we handled it was repetition, repetition, repetition. You know, like we would practice setting up the audio, tearing it down, setting up the whole pit, tearing it down, and really empower the students, because you can't have the parents there all the time, but really empower the students to know exactly what needs to be where. And then I would do things which I call, like, I don't remember what, maybe it was like Apollo 13 training or something like that, like the movie, and they're training and they would say, they're like, oh, well, this mission's going really well. They're like, let's give them a flat tire on landing. And then they would like make a little switch and see how they would handle it, right? Well, I do that with my students. I call it NASA-ing the practice, to where they're setting it all up, but I'll go secretly screw something up to see if they can troubleshoot and figure it out, you know, and get them not to just understand, like, I know, you know, like the monkey see, monkey do, like plug this here and plug that there, but conceptualize what's actually going on. So if there's a problem, they're like, oh, I'm not hearing my sound. I know the first place I need to go to check to make sure something didn't go wrong. And once the students know that, then when you get the parents there on show day, right, you tell the parents you're taking directions from the kids. Like, don't flip it around on them. They know how to do this. You can do what they say, but they're the boss today. And as long as you understand that, you can be on my pit crew, and that worked really well. I feel very fortunate because I grew up in the spring ISD programs in Texas in the early 90s. So like the teachers I had around me were just amazing teachers that would plug us into everything. Like Bill Watson, Diane Vasquez, Don Meyer, Greg Reinhardt. These are all guys that Lamar Burkhalter. I mean, these are all teachers that are really well known in the business that have that I had around me as a kid. So I feel very fortunate, and I sometimes wonder if I would have had the opportunities that I ended up having in the direction that my life went, if it would have gone that way had I not had that band program to be in. And like during the time I was in spring, we went from uh, basically being like an up and coming program to being national champions at BOA my senior year. And so it was a pretty neat time to go through that. The percussion program was really pushing hard too. And there was like 4 or 5 guys that all ended up doing this, professionally and making an impact that were all around me at the same time, And so like not only just the collection of teachers, but the collection of students that I was around, I think was really unique. And so that was a great experience. And then one of the summers, I think the percussion ensemble had won the PAS call for tapes. There was like 4 of us that over one spring break, we were forced to record a tape for call for tapes over our spring break, and we kind of haphazardly did it and ended up uh, being the chosen ensemble. So that was exciting, and that was a great experience. So we went to the Percussive Arts Society convention, and that would just blew my mind open as a student, to see all these people that I heard about. Oh, hey, that's the guy that's on the mallets that I hold in my hand, or that's the guy that wrote this piece of music, and like all those things were just really inspiring. And then we went up to the BOA symposium. I guess we were invited to perform as a guest ensemble. The percussion ensemble was at the BOA symposium when I think it was between my junior and senior year. It's hard to remember right now because that was like 92 or 93. And so that was a great experience. We got to be in the symposium. The thing I remember most about that is getting to play with Dave Samuels, who is a professional jazz artist, vibraphonist, and that was the thing I was the most interested in, and asking him how I needed to learn jazz theory. And he told me the book I needed to get, and I went home and pretended to be sick for a week so I could learn out of the book. Well, I was actually sick for the first 2 days, and then the last 3 days I faked it because I was like learning chords, and thought it was awesome. And so I remember, getting to actually get up and play something with him because he invited some students up to do a exercise with him during his clinic, and so like these are the kinds of experiences that kind of shape my life, and so then when I got into college, Greg Reinhardt and my professor at Kentucky, Jim Campbell, were both very much involved with the summer symposiums during that time, and particularly the drumline track. And so Greg would get me to come be a teacher at the camp, when I was in college and I was working with the high schoolers. And those were great experiences too, because I was getting to intermingle with this amazing faculty that they had for these camps. And so that also just really paved the way and helped me network. And so like, I had all the people I needed to in front of me, and I had all the knowledge I needed to there for me to take. So it was up to me, like it was going to be my fault if I didn't get anything done or make use of these opportunities. And so that I feel very fortunate that was the opportunities that I was able to like just I kind of lucked into, and so, and then yeah, post college life, when I became a professional educator, I was very much interested in trying to get whatever program I was involved with Bands of America or Music for All or the Percussive Arts Society, like all those opportunities that I saw that I had. The programs I wanted to work with were ones that were very active in those organizations. And if I ended up working with a program that wasn't, I encouraged them to be there. I think I was a head band director. Well, they didn't have more than one director. I was the only director at a school in California that had not traditionally participated in Bands of America, and I got them involved into that. I don't know if they're still going to it or not, but you know, uh, it was a great experience for the kids, and that's really what I wanted to put them and give them some of the same environments that I had to hopefully benefit from those opportunities as well.
Absolutely. And what's wonderful, of course, is that you were in those opportunities, but then you were smart enough to take advantage of them and to grow through them and to continue letting that move you on to the next step in what you're. It's been quite an impressive career. It's a very cool story you just explained to us.
Well, I appreciate hearing that. I just I just get interested in things. I don't really think of it any more than just following my interests, and it's kind of taken me in some very strange directions, but it seems almost like it took me this long to really arrive at the thing that makes the most sense for me to do, which is get this music and technology layer together. And I'm really hoping that when music educators or especially band directors, when they think technology, that they're like, we need to reach out to John Best because he's a resource for us, and he can help. So that's kind of what I'm hoping to do, is kind of be a unique individual in the field that can help. So
Great.
that's
Well,
what
I
I'm
love
doing.
that. And I think it's really interesting how our lives do that. You don't always follow the path you expected, and you never end up maybe where you thought you were, but it all makes sense in the end, how all those pieces fit
Sometimes,
together. And look where you've ended up. Makes perfect sense now that you're here, but the
right?
path to
Didn't
get here
make
was
sense
not
on
what
the
you
way.
thought.
Yeah, not at all. Not when you're like, counting election votes, late at night and on a computer system that you're trying to make sure doesn't get hacked. It doesn't really correlate to where I am now, but it all got me here. Yeah.
Well, and that's how life is, all those experiences you have in all the different ways that you can't imagine all add up to making you, have the valuable skills you have. So it's
Yeah.
very interesting how diverse yours were, but how it logically sort of ended up here. I can't wait to see what you end up doing next. You've described some of those
Me
things.
either.
Yeah, you too, right?
Yeah. Yeah.